I think they have a willingness, that softness, that curiosity allows a better connection to what unseen forces guide their lives.
I'm Heather Grish, and this is the Wisdom of the Body podcast. This podcast explores the idea of body intelligence as the real key to learning the knowledge of life, or what we call Ayurveda in the ancient language of Sanskrit. We do that by connecting with today's creative leaders and experts who will help you listen to your body, trust your gut, and live in deeper harmony with nature. Come join me as we unlock the golden door to clear, direct perception and become very deep listeners. You can find the Wisdom of the Body podcast on Apple, Spotify, and Stitcher. You can also follow us by joining my email at heathergrish.com or on Instagram at heathergrish. I know you're going to love this podcast, so take a second right now to subscribe. Today I'm here with Robin Mastro, who is the co-founder of Vastu Creations and the American Institute of Vastu, which are consultancy, design, and educational companies that focus on eliminating environmental stress for greater productivity, improved health, and well-being. Robin has been a teacher of meditation and Vedic breathing for 25 years. Her research in accessing the power of altars in the Vedic tradition led her to study ancient cultures around the world and how they connected with unseen forces to support their daily lives. She's co-authored 3 award-winning books on Vastu: Altars of Power and Grace, The Way of Vastu, and Making Room for Mr. Right. And she's co-authored those books with her husband, Michael, who I also recently interviewed on the show. For decades, Robin has worked with students and clients to live healthier, more harmonious, and productive lives, and she's in service to others through award-winning books, courses, and online offerings. Robin, I'm very excited to be interviewing you today. And I think it's one of the ones I'm most excited about that I've done for a while, because I'm aspiring to be a member of a powerful couple. And, just when I think about the title of one of your books, The Altars of Power and Grace, and the interplay of power and grace is such a beautiful topic. And I think, one that a lot of us struggle with and are curious about and are inspired by all at the same time. And this has been such a big part of your life for so long, both you and your husband. And I also know his work's pretty cool too. How did you, though, get into this? How did you decide to focus your whole life's work on Vedic altars?
Well, it actually happened even before I knew about the science of Vastu Shastra, which is the science of building in harmony with nature, which is pretty much the basis for all of my deep dive into the Vedic science, all the Vedic sciences. But before I even knew Michael, I was a young mother. My daughter wasn't even out of diapers at the time. And I was married to another man who was he really wanted to remake himself in the way he was successful in the past. So, of course, that doesn't ever work. And we lost everything. And through the help of family, we were able to rent a little townhouse in the Northwest I think it was in Kirkland, Washington, which is near Microsoft. And I remember feeling very, very grateful that I had a roof over my head, because we were actually homeless for about 3 weeks. And that's hard when you have an infant. And I realized that during all that upheaval, I had let go of my spiritual practices. And I remember meditating one day soon after we had moved into this little townhouse. And I had this incredible waking dream. I was in a forest, looking through the forest into a clearing. And it was just as the full moon was rising. And as that full moon was rising, there was a group of people that came into this clearing that I was watching. And they came in to do ceremony. And they were bringing things underneath the full moon to honor the forces of nature in their lives and to allow themselves to speak to that energy in a very personal way to support them through the next cycle. And this I kind of felt just as I was watching. So they laid objects sat in a very specific pattern. And as I was watching, I watched them lay out the five elements: earth, air, water, fire, and space, which are truly part of the Vedic sciences. And in the middle, they had this hammered golden chalice. And in that chalice, they put everything of value that they each had in a ceremony. And then they were chanting in a foreign language. And my sense was that this was Druid in nature. And, when I came out of that vision, it was so real, so palpable to me. It was like, I've had things like that happen before, but they're far and few between. And I knew there was some meaning there. And here I was, this young woman with not a lot. Up until that time we got that house or that townhouse, I was counting pennies for food and out of my pockets of my coat. And so it was tough. And I felt this incredible sense that what I had seen was very powerful magic. So it was building towards the full moon, and this little townhouse had a balcony off of the master bedroom. And I went out onto that balcony and I attempted to recreate what I had seen. And I placed the elements in the order that I had seen. And since I didn't have a golden chalice, I took my salad bowl and I put aluminum foil in the bottom. I figured it was about allowing the moon to reflect. And so I put that in the middle and I piled in my available cash, whatever jewelry I had, my checkbook, maybe a credit card or two. I thought, okay, so I'm off the first floor and nobody knows I'm doing this. So I think my things are safe for a night or two while the moon is full. And I realized that there was ceremony that was done. And all I did was pray to be supported and protected for the next month so that we wouldn't bounce any checks and so that we would have food on the table and so that our lives would get better. And our lives improved. I never bounced a check again. I always had money in the bank, and I've done that ceremony every month for the last 35 years.
Wow.
That's the beginning. And that marriage didn't work. It probably lasted another 6 or 9 months. And then for about a year and a half, I was single. And then Michael and I got together. And he taught me about the science of Vastu. And I realized that there was something very similar to what I had seen. And, if you look back at kind of the ancient unwritten history that somehow is passed on through word of mouth, through the generations, you actually do see that bridge between the Vedas and what was happening with the Druids and the divine feminine, masculine, historical kind of way we lived pre 3,000 years ago, where men and women were all both seen as very powerful and needed for that balance to occur, for life to be, full of grace. And that's pretty much what we've been lacking, I think, pre-Christian theology, pre-religion like we know it now. So I think it really started about 1,000 years before Christ, where there was that break and where there was such a domination of the male over the female, and the imbalance began, and there was not an honoring of the female at all, that divine feminine presence. So for me, the Vastu gave me a roadmap and an understanding of the sciences that have been there for 7,000 to 10,000 years. And Michael and I we came together when we first started our relationship. We asked each other what we wanted, and we wanted the same things. We both wanted to raise healthy, happy kids, and we wanted to do good work in the world. And so it's been our life mission to serve people through the work that we do. But he was already doing Vastu before I met him, but not quite the way we do it now. And so when we came together and he taught me about Vastu, I went back to school and got my graduate degree focused on the science. And both my advisor and the head of the department were PhD architects, one from UC Berkeley and the other from the University of Cairo. And the work that I was thinking of doing was trying to figure out how to create smaller environments using the science of Vastu that had those powerful elements, but were easy to use and actually fun to use, and people actually got results from. So I think I'm probably the only person that has a master's degree in creating Vedic altars.
Oh my gosh. And it's interesting because I studied a tiny bit of Vastu in Ayurveda school. It's a very small, mini, tiny introductory piece in our curriculum. And I wrote one small bit about it in my book about fertility because I think it's such a big part of that journey. But I'd never really thought about altars being in some way this like mini version of what's playing out in the larger spatial things that are looked at in Vastu in the way that Michael spoke about it. And I think that you went to great lengths to learn about altars and study them in different cultures. And I remember growing up as a child and, being in my Catholic church and them having an altar. And so I'm really looking forward to hearing, what you've found about these altars and why they work and how we can use them in our daily lives. And, because I think some people would look at that and go, that's kind of witchy. But there's a whole group of us that hear that and go, ooh, I like that it's witchy.
Yeah, I feel personally, before I got involved in this stuff, I was a intuitive, and that just was there. And I had a very successful following up in Seattle area, but I wasn't into what I call the long and flowy aspect of intuitive readings. I would show up in like my business suit with my crystal ball, and I was doing readings for doctors and lawyers and real estate agents, and I was doing crystal healing layout before anybody was doing crystals at all. And all of that was just downloading in me. And yet I am a very curious, but I also question a lot. Spirituality to me is a very fine line because my deep love is Divine Mother. So even though I have a guru and I love him to pieces, I think he's absolutely wonderful. And I've taught Vedic breathing, meditation, and yoga for the Art of Living Foundation for forever, since like the early 90s. Mike and I were the founding directors in the state of Washington. I have this incredible devotional energy. I'm going to like cry to Divine Mother and Mother Mary. To me, that's my jam. And I was not raised religiously. I did not come from that background. You felt that there was something good in all religions. So I was being taught by my father about Shintoism and Zoroastrianism and Buddhism and Hinduism, as well as Judaism and Christianity. I knew there was similarities in all religions, and it also baffled me why there was such kind of judgment and pain because of these religions. So I don't think that's how it was originally ever going to be set up. But I think, again, with this imbalance between the male-female energy, there was a desire to have power over people's innocence and willingness to believe in things that they were being dictated to and then forced to believe in so many instances as well. That out of fear of their lives, some people just succumbed to whatever powers that be were available in their culture. But I see the beauty in all religions. I see the ceremony as something that my heart longs for. And that sense of community is something that does not really exist everywhere. And I think that is what so many people desire now, is that feeling of belongingness. And I think through the work that we did in the state of Washington, in the Seattle area, through the Art of Living, as well as the development of my personal path, we brought a lot of people together in our home every week to either teach them or bring them together to create altars together under the full moon or chant, do mantras together. And I think that as I grew, the people around me grew. And I realized that with all of that we taught, all the meditation, all the yoga, the Vedic breathing, people in our meditation group were still suffering. until we added that element of Vastu. And once that kind of created that holistic balance, people's lives began to change. And some of those people started out as, kind of like they came from India and they were here on some kind of a little bit of a visa and they were working for a startup. And now they're general managers at Amazon. I mean, these people, and every time they change a job or a home, they call my husband because they feel that that's the edge that they need. So it's really created a wonderful network for us. And I think that my delving into the altars was just a natural progression of events. And I remember I was in graduate school. We had bought a house and we were in the middle of remodeling it and we were on our way to India. And I thought, oh my God, and it was time for me to establish my graduate project. And I was like, I can't do all of this. This is too much going on. And I thought, I'm going to either have to drop out of school or whatever I am doing in India has to work with what I am doing in graduate school. And I had been to Egypt with my cohort in graduate school. And, you really feel and see the incredible amount of history and energy is so powerful there in the temples and in the tombs that that there was some other energy happening and there was something more than what we really understand that's written in our historical information or we've deciphered. And then in India, and I think we were on our way to Bali at the same time and then to India, everywhere you look are these beautiful little altars or these puja setups where they're going to do sacred ceremony, a fire ceremony of some kind. But they weren't done according to Vastu. And I thought, okay, well, what if we take the layout of how Vastu is done, because Vastu is a directional science. And what if I create a small environment using the science and using the Vedic knowledge? What would happen? So I proposed that to my graduate committee when I got back, and they were all excited because, here they are like, oh, you're going to change the face of architecture doing this work. And I'm like, well, this was done before you guys were doing architecture. I'm not changing anything, but I am creating a new element by making these small environments. And what I think about the altars it's like a microcosm of the universe in perfect order. So they act as like a radio transmitter. Depending on the direction that they're placed, each of the directions in a home or an office has a specific aspiration, a specific energy that is connected to color and the planets and mantras and yantras, all kinds of pieces that are powerful. If those things are kind of used in conjunction, they boost the efficacy of the altars, and the altars act as like a homing device for what it is that you desire. And I proposed that I try it out. I tried it out on some friends and some family members who thought I was nuts. Their lives started changing. And even the ones that were not spiritual, didn't have spiritual practice, weren't meditators, they were just doing me a favor, their lives began to change, even though they couldn't put the pieces together as to why. But the people who took the time to go deep on a regular basis or felt connected because of their yoga practice or their journaling or the therapy that they were doing, they could link the occurrences of that change. They could feel the subtle changes in their lives. And when the physical changes started manifesting, they really could see the difference. And they knew that it was coming from the altars.
Well, I'm totally a believer in this stuff working. And I don't know that any of us really you had kind of this really cool way of saying, that it creates a receiver. Is that kind of
like a radio transmitter?
A transmitter. Okay.
When we tune into a station, it's very clear. And that's what you're doing with this. It's like we just don't feel connected. We don't feel powerful. We don't feel like we have that deep connection to the divine, and yet we do. And the rest of it is just that we've been hypnotized to believe that we need to go through, somebody else has the answer for us. But we innately do have that connection, and it just gives us that sense of personal power.
Yeah. Do you think that these altars are, because I mean, I remember that from being in India, and I also remember the altars a lot of places in Thailand.
Mm-hmm.
People would walk up the street and they would just, go and light some incense on their walk up the street. And I loved that, just the building in of these random spots. And there may be a reason that it was in that spot, and I don't know, because I'm just swooping in from my 2-week vacation on the beach, and just not really understanding what's going on there. But just the reverence for these rituals. And I got so inspired talking to your husband. I'm getting so inspired talking to you about, how to really work within our lives, especially for people who are trying to do what they can for their health, for their self-care, or even just like things they're trying to manifest in their lives, which is obviously like a big thing. And, what can we do? And it's very simply in the space around us to create an effect. And why does that work?
I think that what I have found is that other cultures, they're just a little more innocent. They're not so sure they know everything. And I think they have a willingness, that softness, that curiosity allows better connection to what unseen forces guide their lives. And they're also closer to nature, mostly, And if they live in the big cities and they're caught up in it, it's still a cultural part of their lives. And we lost that connection to the divine somewhere along the line. I think unless you come from some other ethnic group within the United States, it's like we don't really, white people have their religions, and their religions are fairly specific. And I think that we have busied ourselves to the point that we don't know that we are part of nature, and we don't know that we have lost that deeper connection to the forces that guide our lives. And the timing right now, it's essential that we come back to that we nourish our souls, because we're really depleted on so many levels. And I think we've become very critical and hypersensitive to what is wrong. And we need to bring some of that gentleness, that magic, that female grace, the compassion back into our lives. And the altars gives you an opportunity to create beauty in your life. And I feel that that element of beauty is very close to the divine. And when we love something, it's very personal. I mean, beauty to me may be very different than beauty to you. But when I feel something is beautiful, it feeds me. And we need to be replenished. And I feel that when we create something of beauty, it heals a part of our physiology, that mind, body, spirit piece comes together, and it just relaxes us enough to allow the magic to occur. And, that's kind of sounds a little woo-woo, but, there's nothing in our world that isn't. If you were to look at it under a microscope, we're not what we think we are. We are elements coming together, dancing together. And we have lost that feeling that we have, that is our divine right. I think that we have really lost our sense of connection. We've become fascinated with our cell phones and our
information.
technology. Yeah. We're so immersed in what's in that technology that we don't really put enough attention on ourselves. And when we try to, we're very overstimulated. It really takes us kind of disconnecting pretty willingly. You have to make that decision that I am giving myself this amount of time away from my technology to feel myself, to reconnect with myself, reconnect with my essential nature, and reconnect with the divine. Because it's not that, it's within us. It's not something else. I feel that the beauty, the sacredness, and the humility that goes into creating an altar is something that we need right now. And I think even your listeners who poo-hoo it, I would say to you to challenge your beliefs a little bit and allow yourself to open up to the possibility that you don't have all the answers and that there is something greater than what you see running your life. I mean, there is something else out there that is going to support you if you would allow it.
I love how you said that there's humility involved. Could you talk a little bit more about why is there humility in that process?
Well, I think that we come to our spiritual practices open. And if you do yoga, you know there are days where it just isn't as good as maybe the day before. Or if you meditate, not every day do you transcend, and not every day do you have the experience that you just are beyond the body. We can't control our experiences, but when we allow ourselves to come to our practices without an agenda and just, know that you are not the doer, you are not all of that you want the divine to show you what is yours to do. There's just so much that we can do. And there's a lot of fascination out there with being successful and a lot of information, like we were talking about. Like, we know a lot of stuff, but humility and grace, beauty, it's kind of, a lot of it is not stuff we can control. And yet we need that. We need that to heal, like this part of us that's been really fractured with all this stuff that's gone on the last 2 or 3 years. We just need to take time to experience the sacred in our environments. And the work that we do is about, helping people end that disconnect and bringing them the experience that they can step into the river and flow with the current. They don't have to make it happen. They can just relax a little bit and feel that gentleness that comes from letting go a little of the need to have that outcome look a certain way. And sometimes people come to their altar and they have very specific demands or desires. But I feel that our connection to the divine is deeper than what our mind considers that we really need. And that usually what's given to us is so much more in alignment with what is going to help us in our personal growth and our evolution and in receiving what it is we truly need and desire beyond what the mind thinks that we want.
It wants. That's so hard because that's the only part of our mind that we can access regularly is the conscious mind. And we think it's the one that knows exactly what's going on, but it's not. And it's really hard because it's the one that you can be more aware of, at least with the way that, humans have come to now in our history. So when people are building an altar, gosh, I'm just getting so many ideas of things I want to do in my house. And do you recommend that this be something that a person does alone or with others or both?
And I have to say the work that I do is like an evolutionary process for me too. So my first book I wrote was published in 2004 and people still buy it because it is transforming their lives. But when I wrote that, I really felt that all the information was in that book. And then, it's like as I grew, my understanding of these altars grew. And by my third book, which is something I think maybe some of your listeners would be interested in, is Making Room for Mr. Right. It was about community. I think in the altars book, it was more about addressing each of the individual altars in your home. And then there was, altars mentioned in the back of the book for the full moon and for group gatherings and things. But the whole premise of Making Room for Mr. Right was a group of women coming together and supporting one another in their journey to bring into their lives relationships or to enhance the relationships that they had. And I think that to me is what people long for right now is a sense of community. And during COVID, I was doing something for my greater community on Zoom called Mantra Mondays. And we'd come together every Monday.
I came to a couple of those.
Yeah, I mean, they were fun to do. And then I started feeling I needed to pull away because I felt drawn to something else I needed to start focusing on. And that's kind of the work I'm working on now, which is rather exciting, is more of that balance of that divine feminine, divine masculine energy in the altars and utilizing that information and actually imbibing that information, becoming that within ourselves and bringing that to the altar. And so the work is shifting as I am different kinds of information are coming in through meditation and just, living my life. Things happen and I'm just like, wow, I can add that. That's really cool. And it's like, I think I'm very blessed in that I am living my path. I live it every day. And I feel very grateful. But none of this would mean that much if I wasn't helping other people.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, I'm thinking that I'm going to do a summer solstice gathering altar online. I just kind of came up with that in the last couple of days to promote something I'm doing around moon magic and manifestation, which is going to be a little course that I'm offering that leads into something else. And I haven't done this for myself. So I'm evolving. Mostly over the last 25 years or so, I have been focusing on bringing the knowledge of Vastu to people through our work and Michael's courses in Jyotish and Vastu and supporting him. I've kind of taken a back seat because I thought all the information was in the books. People didn't really need me. But I realized I think that I need to be out there. And I'm feeling that my time is coming up and I'm definitely excited now, a little scared because it's new for me to bring this knowledge out this way. But I feel like it's time. And people have been asking for this for a really long time. And I was always a little hesitant. But now I feel compelled. Sometimes when you step into what you need to do, it scares the heck out of you, right?
Yeah.
But you feel you have to do it. And that's where I'm at right now.
Well, that's why I'm glad that I chose to interview both you and Michael separately because, I know that when a husband and wife duo works together, there's always a dynamic there, and we're each sort of individuals that bring different things to the table. And then there's a combination and a dynamic that is created when we come together. And then we are in our own essence very different than each other, that where when we create things on our own, they're different than what we would do with our partner. And I don't collaborate with my partner because he is a uber nerdy scientist that I cannot so I'm fascinated by couples that do have work together in their passions or in a work capacity. And so I'm glad I chose to interview both of you separately. And a lot of what you're saying about, because as a mother myself and as a female in a male female partnership, I think the power balances within the relationship and the influences that the relationships, like I've often felt like as a woman that in order for me to surrender to my relationship, that I have to sort of, I don't want to say dim myself, but like shrink myself in some way to like empower that other person. And I think it's a trap, mentally that I've experienced, and I don't know why that is there, but I feel like a lot of women feel that way. And that then this idea of stepping out on our own to do something is scary. And I don't know, I'm just really relating a lot to what you're saying,
Yeah.
but I don't collaborate as much with my partner on projects except, raising our child, which is a big project.
When you have children, it's a very different energy. And my daughter has a little baby right now, year and a half, and she's working, and her husband also works, and everything is happening in their house at the same time. And even though, I mean, she's a lawyer for Microsoft, she's got a big time job, but she realizes that it kind of, even though they had agreed that the power, they were both going to be parenting equally, that it's like that is not something that happens in all relationships. And I think that that nurturing piece, even in your generation, is still, we're still in transition with that.
Women today feel very, very disconnected from that nurturing energy. And that's why I'm happy that someone like you would come out as a leader, with experience and call that out in us and really nurture that part of the women. There's so many women walking around right now feeling like they're not in touch with their divine feminine, and so many women that feel like they've taken on this kind of man's world and done things the man's way and sort of lost the beauty of their life in the process. It's a theme that comes up with so many women, especially it does come up a lot in the fertility journey, which is one of the journeys I deal with a lot. And yeah, but then there's also a lot of shifts happening with gender roles at the same time, in society, which makes things even more confusing about what is normal and okay and things like that.
Yeah, there's a lot going on. And I think there's another even layer of like, want to be acting spiritual or not living it, but addressing it or whatever it is, where you see maybe the desire to follow somebody on that path ends up kind of having to look a certain way. And I have been around this block all of my adult life. I mean, I think I was doing stuff, before. I know my mother used to call the yoga teacher when I was like 18 going, where's my daughter? Because back then it was pretty witchy to do yoga. I mean, it was like there was nobody doing that stuff. And I happened to find a couple of teachers where I was living. But I grew up on the peninsula, and the San Francisco Peninsula. There was stuff happening there. But if you were, going to Arizona or you were going to Nevada, nobody was doing that. Nobody was doing much of anything. And I think that I have seen, this kind of evolution of where people are at with their spiritual practices and how long it really takes to feel connected to something outside of yourself, that you actually have a sense of that presence being within yourself. Sometimes we need that person, that wise person, to come into our lives to enlighten us. But truly, none of that is really more important than us feeling connected within ourselves. Yes, it's wonderful to have a roadmap, and I hope I provide that for people. I'm not looking to be your guru. I'm looking to give you tools and walk you to that gate and know that I've done my job, and that it's up to you whether to walk through that and utilize those tools that I provide. And I think that for me, that's being in integrity with my own personal
Yeah.
reasoning.
And it's interesting because some of this has to do with the sort of the teacher student dynamic and what inspires us, right? So, this idea that you can inspire a person just by telling them your story.
Right.
Like if I sit here and I listen to you tell the story of when you lost your house, and I recall the moment when I was 15 when my parents lost my house and I had to move in with my grandfather, and like that immediate connection. And then all of a sudden I'm connected with you,
Right.
all of a sudden I'm connected with you. And then I'm like, wow, I know what I did in my life to improve my sense of safety after a moment like that happened to me or something. And then interested in your path and how you did that, and how in some ways your path feels really magical. Like, wow, I just went and got a corporate job and like started paying my bills. Like, it's like, and put my business suit on and, was unhappy till I was 35, and then went back to Ayurveda school and blew my life up and started over. And this idea that just by you being you are an inspiration to other people. And also coming back to Vastu, we know beauty when we see it. We know beauty when we hear it. And that's really what matters. I wanted to ask you, specifically about, and I know we're getting short on time, what would be like the one piece of advice you would give to someone thinking about starting a family? Where would you have them start in building an altar?
It's a really good question. I think there's just so many little pieces there that I want to say, but in making room for Mr. Right, I really give a process that helps you dive into the things that are standing in your way of creating a successful relationship, whether it's with another person or with yourself, with friends, with family. The things that we learn are the things that sometimes block us from knowing that we have some power. And one of the processes I take women through in this book is to look at what we learned about men from our fathers. And it's very, very subtle, but it's very interesting. There are things that I had never even imagined that I had learned from my dad that were running my life. And I think that, and a lot of beliefs about that made me afraid of men, that made me not want to trust men. And it wasn't until I met Mike, my husband, this is my third marriage, I have to say.
You're practiced.
But we've been together for 35 years. So it took me a while to understand that I had a right to ask for what I wanted. And I think that knowing what I wanted, I had done some of these processes that I share in this book about 3 weeks before I met him. And I had known him, but we were both unhappily married to other people. And so I didn't go there, with a married man or anything. I learned that lesson earlier. But I think that this work that I teach magnetizes relationships to you. But you have to do that work inside first. So whatever it is that you desire, you have to clear the pathways inside first. All that longing, all the frustration, all the desiring to have what it is that we want, that is going to remain outside until we really want to come somewhat healed, because wherever it is that we're at, that's the energy we're pulling in, whether it's a child or a woman or a man in our lives. We want to be clear enough to be able to see what it is happening out there. And nobody's perfect. You're not going to get that perfect person, but you're going to get people who are willing. And if you're willing to work on you, that person is also going to be willing to work on their stuff. And that makes it so much easier. And all I can say is, God, the guys I was married to before, oh my God, the nightmares. And it isn't that Mike is perfect. It's that compared to where I had been and the growth that where I was at in my own personal evolution, he is light years easier to be together with, and so much in service and so appreciative of our connection, even to this day. And that to me is such a healing, because in my family lineage, that women were not happy. They were very unhappy and dissatisfied in their marriages. And part of that was, what I was distrusting. And I had to I had to know what it is. I had to see it before I could heal it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I remember when after I had my child, my partner started calling me mom. And I was like, oh, we have something to work on here. Like every time we would get in a fight, he would call me mom subconsciously. I was like, okay.
Yeah. It is so interesting. The parenting process really does add a whole different dimension to relationship. And it is, all I can say is on the other side of it, I am so grateful. I have my daughter and my two stepchildren in my life. They are fabulous people, but they went through it, us coming together, and nothing was easy when they were young, but they turned out really well. And so you're not going to damage your kids by going through your stuff. I just have to say they're more resilient than you think. And the best part comes when you become a grandparent. I mean, I am delighted to see this continuation of my lineage and how profoundly amazing this generation, your son, my granddaughter, is that these kids coming in now are, whoa, they are just powerful beings.
My son just like started sitting in half lotus naturally, as a child. I'm just sitting there going like, what's happening here?
I remember when my daughter was born, I looked at her. She looked just like a little Tibetan monk. And she was born on Maharishi Mahesh Yogi's birthday, which is January 12th. And I looked at her and I said, where did you come from? She did not look like me and her Southern father at all. So that was very powerful. And then my granddaughter was also born on on Diwali. So, I mean, and she was early. It's like she chose that day to come in. And in India, women get pregnant and then schedule C-sections for Diwali.
Oh, wow.
Because that is the most auspicious day to be born in the Hindu calendar. So I was just, wow, these kids. So I think the adventure of parenting is just enjoy the ride, because I swear the minute they can walk, they start leaving you, as you probably know.
Yeah.
They start just building their world. Their world is going to be more than just you right from the start. So it is really such a pleasure to watch the evolutionary process between the generations. So.
Well, Robin, thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us. I know that you have a free gift that you'll be giving away to the audience as well. You want to tell them a little bit about that?
I'm offering a ebook on how to create a full moon altar. And it's something that you build as the moon is building. You put your altar together. It teaches you how the placement is, and it gives you a yantra to do a certain ceremony, a sacred ceremony to ignite the altar. And you keep that altar up until the moon begins to wane, and then you take it down. This is an altar that isn't one of the 8 directional altars that I work with in our work. It's very specific for the full moon. So it's very powerful. You're using the energy of Lakshmi, the goddess of abundance, that comes with that full moon energy that builds. So offering it, and a lot of people's lives, just by doing this one altar, really experience a lot of change in a good way.
This is such great timing. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, and once you guys do it, please let me know. And I think there's contact information in the ebook, how to reach me. I love to see the pictures of people's altars and hear about their experiences.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Robin, for being here with us on the Wisdom of the Body.
Thank you so much for inviting me. Appreciate it.
I want to thank you for listening to this show. It brings me great pleasure to provide this content to you. I also want to let you know that I'll be making some very amazing announcements soon. And if you're not already on my email list, then I encourage you to go over to my website and subscribe to my email list so that I can keep you informed about these announcements that are going to be coming up very soon. So my website is heathergrish.com. That's Heather, GRZYCH.com. And I look forward to getting these important announcements to you very soon and connecting. Thank you for tuning in and dropping in with us today. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. I really want to hear your feedback. To learn more about my work, visit heathergrish.com. That's Heather, GRZYCH.com. And meet me here next time on the Wisdom of the Body.